Testing, testing. It works. All right. Well, we're going to get started here. First of all, I want to give you all a very warm welcome here to the Spirit Lake Seventh-day Adventist Church. This is our community. This is our fellowship hall. So someone said, "Can we eat in here?" And yes, you can eat in here. But hopefully, you won't be eating any of these seeds yet today, but you'll be getting the fruit of the seeds later on. Gardening is really interesting to many people. Last year, we had 150 people at this event. It overflowed into the other room. I think maybe the weather today kept a few of you away. Well, a few of them away. You are all here. So glad to see you all. Gardening for many is about getting in the dirt and, watching that little seed grow. But for some of us, it's also a spiritual thing. When God put Adam and Eve in the garden, he gave them a Garden of Eden. And he said to tend and keep it. So there was fruit that they ate. The fruit, nuts, and grains was the original food that they got in the Garden of Eden. And in the Bible, Jesus also talks several times of parables using seeds and planting and the fruit that was produced by it and how it represented the work of the Holy Spirit in our lives and producing fruit of character. And so there's a lot of wonderful lessons that come out of just working in the dirt and planting a seed and watching it grow. And so as we work in our gardens, we think about that a lot. And I'd invite you to consider that as well as you plant and grow and reap. Our speaker today is Dawn. Dawn is she loves the garden too and does this kind of stuff all over the place. And so if you haven't seen her before, you'll know why you want to see her again. She has many other places that she shows up, and so, find out about them. I know you'll enjoy what you have here today. We also have this little health, wellness, and disaster preparedness day for the community. I have a couple pieces of paper here. I'll pass them out. This is all we have, right? Okay. So I'll leave one up here. You can get a picture of it if you didn't get one. I'll pass out to whoever wants one of these. So, and I'll come by in a sec and just see who wants one. And with that, I think, are we all set, Matt, and everything else going okay? Come on in. What I wanted to do before we start this afternoon is just have a word of prayer, okay? If you bow your heads with me. Father in heaven, I thank you so much for the gift of life. Thank you for the beautiful weather outside. It is beautiful. It's nice and fresh and cool. But Father, we are also here to learn about seeds and planting, and so we're looking forward to the spring when all this stuff can get started. I pray that you would bless Dawn today as she speaks, and for each one here listening to understand and see the beautiful things that you've created and given us to enjoy. I pray that you would bless each person. And I thank you, Father, for hearing us this afternoon. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right. Oh, boy.
Anybody want one of these? Okay.
Oh, I'm on, but I don't know why this isn't showing as a slideshow now. Something happened.
It's up on this side. Oh, I see.
Oh, are you wanting it to?
The view, presenter view. I don't know if it was.
Use presenter view.
It should be a black screen. Yeah, maybe I just need to reopen everything again, shut all those. From the beginning. There we go. Yep. Okay. Here we go. We are ready. Thank you for being patient. Okay. So that's up. Oh, good. Okay. So people ask me why I do what I do. Well, I'm passionate about gardening, and I want to be able to teach as many people as I can. And I feel like the Lord has showed me some things that I can show and teach other people. I do not know everything. I don't claim to know everything. I'm not a master gardener, but I'm willing to teach. I'm a teacher by trade, and now I'm teaching adults instead of children. So I'm willing to show what I know. And I feel like there's a real sense of urgency right now to get the message out. This can be done, and it can be done simply and economically. And so I just keep booking these classes, which I'm crazy. I don't know why I do this to myself. But I'm like 2 or 3 a week, and it's killing me. But I'm trying to get it out there, and I'm trying to do it. And I don't charge because I want people to be able to come no matter what. And so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So part 1 is Gardening 101, and if you are a master gardener, just hang with me. Hopefully you'll learn something, but we're going to start at the very beginning. Sowing seeds and preparing your garden is going to be about an hour long, and then season extension, and then part 2 will be winter gardening and growing year-round. And then part 3, I brought a special guest speaker with me who is a certified herbalist all the way from Bonners Ferry, and he will be helping me do part 3. And that will be 30 minutes, 40 minutes, something like that. So that's where we're heading. So let's start at the very beginning. If you can, start in the fall. If you can't, if you're just now starting, that's fine too. But start to prepare your garden. And number 1, put up a good fence. This might seem really silly, but I keep hearing stories of these poor people that the deer come and they eat all their food. They did not put up a fence first. So once you plant something in your yard and the deer knows where it is, guess what? They'll be back again next year, no matter if you put a fence up or not. They will bust the fence down, they will jump it, whatever, to get in there, because now they know there's food. But if you first of all take the time to put up a good fence, they don't know there's anything behind that fence, so you're better off that way as far as protection from the wildlife. Get your soil ready. Start early, okay? Start in the fall if you can by burying kitchen compost or putting manure down before the snow falls so that everything can start to decompose and get ready for the spring, so that by the time spring comes around, the snow melts, your garden is ready to go, okay? But if you're just now starting, that's fine, no worries. Do everything that you can right now. If you have animals, or if you know somebody that has animals and you can get manures, you can do that. You can add things like newspaper and cardboard. When I first started, I went out into the woods with a wheelbarrow and I just dug up whatever dark black, good stuff under the trees that I could find. That's how I first started. I didn't have beds or anything like that. So just keep that in mind, okay? You can do soil testing. You can buy your own kits and do that. You can send it in to an extension office and have them test it for you and tell you what minerals your soil is depleted in, but I'm not talking about that today. That's something that you can research on your own. So what kinds of things do you need to get started? It does not need to be expensive, okay? Visit all of your local thrift stores, garage sales. Start collecting different types of pots and containers. As you can see, these are not fancy, okay? These are muffin tins. These are mushroom things. This is a juice bottle, tofu dish, water bottles, whatever you have. Start collecting things because what I'm going to be teaching you today is sowing seeds. We're actually going to be starting seeds from scratch, okay? I'm not teaching you how to go to Home Depot and buy a plant. I'm teaching you how to actually sow the seed yourself. Okay, for number 1, it's cheaper. Okay, so what else do you need? You need a really good potting mix. Don't cut corners on this, okay? Trust me, I know from experience. Get something that's made specific for starting seeds, that's full of all the minerals and nutrients that tiny little seedling is going to need. Because just like a baby growing, if it gets everything it needs right away, it will be a lot more healthy later on. So spend some money and get the good stuff. All right, so let's talk now about seeds. Obviously, there's lots of different seed companies. And how many of us have gotten seed catalogs in the mail in the winter and we're poring over them and, oh, that's so neat, I want that, and I want that, and I want this. So what we're going to talk about is how to select seeds, okay? So I am teaching today to a Zone 5. I'm not sure, you all are probably different, whatever that is for you, but I'm just going to assume we're a Zone 5, okay, so adjust as needed. And you would be considered here a short gardening season, okay? So the definition of a short gardening season is 110 days or less without frost. And some of us have 90 days or less, okay? So that is going to change how you're going to pick out seeds and look through your catalogs. 2 different types of things that you can grow in a short season. Cool season hardy crops and cool season tender crops, okay? The hardy crops are more adapted to the cool climate, and that'd be like broccoli and cabbage and asparagus, and you don't have to use, covers or anything for those. You don't have to put them in a greenhouse because they're more adapted to the cold climate. The more tender crops you would have to start for sure after frost or use covers, and that would be things like green beans and corn and cucumbers, obviously peppers and tomatoes and things like that. So keep that in mind as you're going through your seed catalogs, that this is what you're looking for. You are looking for seeds that are less, I'd say even 90. I don't even like to go more than 90. 90 days or less for maturity. Okay, so you've got your seed packet, and now you've got some other things you need to think about. Do you want to do heirloom seeds or do you want to do non-heirloom seeds, and what's the difference? So an heirloom seed, and one company is Baker Creek. They sell heirloom seeds, but there's other territorial and different ones. So heirloom seed basically means that if you save the seed from that plant, you should be able to use that seed again next year and grow the same plant again. That's what heirloom means. As long as there's no cross-pollinating going on, which I've had that happen before, especially if you do like 5 different types of squash on your hillside, and they're pollinating, and then next year you think, oh, I've got this wonderful heirloom seed, and then you get this really weird-looking squash the next year. So you have to be aware that even though it's heirloom, it could still cross-pollinate with something else. So have it at the back part of your garden or something like that. So non-heirloom would be the opposite, which means you can still save the seed, but you don't know what you're going to get. So, you may have a kale that's purple, and then the next year it's green or red or who knows. For me, I don't do all heirloom just because not all heirloom works really well in a cold climate. You have to experiment and see which ones work the best. And if you have specific ones, you can ask me that I know would work in a cold climate. For me, I'm happy as long as something grows from it. I really don't care what it looks like, as long as I can eat it. And, it grew something, right? Seeds are expensive, and they're harder to find, so keep that in mind. All right, so hybrid seeds. Some people say, oh, never grow a hybrid. Okay, well, hybrid seed just means that they're crossing plants together for a certain location, like dogs, okay? Like if you take a shepherd and a Labrador, you get a shepherdor, because they want one that has the long hair, or you know what I'm saying. They do the same thing with plants. So they'll cross plants together that will do better in a cold climate or more hardy. That's a hybrid. And hybrid broccoli, I have found, does a lot better in a cold climate than the heirloom broccoli does, at least for me. All right, so we're still looking at these seed descriptions here. And you can get these descriptions out of the catalogs too, but I just have a packet here. So it's going to tell you how many days to germination. Okay, so what that means is when you put your potting mix into the container, you put your seeds in, and if it says it takes 5 to 10 days to germinate, that means that when it pops up, okay, out of the dirt. So keep that in mind. That's days to germination. So when you're sowing your seeds, you want to think, oh, this says it's going to take 10 days to germinate. Figure that into your math, because if you're wanting to put this out in the ground in May, you need to back up and go back how many days this is going to take you before you can put it in the ground. So if it takes 10 days to germinate and then you can't eat it for another 50 days after that, figure that out, and I can put this in after frost, then do your math and say this is when I need to start that seed. Does that make sense? And if it's older seed, it's going to take longer than 10 days. It could take 21 days. It could take 30 days to germinate. So keep that in mind too. But one thing you can do if it is really old seed, I had a lady give me a tip last weekend. She said if you take your old seed and you soak it into 1 gallon of water and a 1/4 cup of Epsom salts, and they'll germinate every time. That's what she said. 1/4 cup Epsom salt, 1 gallon water. Haven't tried it yet. I just learned about this last weekend, so there you go. All right, and then it will also tell you how deep to plant your seeds and then how far apart to put each plant. Okay? So as you're going through your seed catalogs, keep all of these things in mind when you're trying to pick out seeds. So don't try to pick out some watermelon that takes 150 days and gets this big. Unless you have a wonderfully heated greenhouse and grow lights and stuff, you could probably do it then. All right. So this is just a chart that I kind of use for my reference and thought it might be helpful to you. When to sow seeds, that means when to start them. Okay, now keep in mind, when I'm starting seeds, I'm starting them in a little dish like this, and I'm not using grow lights and I'm not using heating mats. Okay, I literally just put everything in a sunny window and I rotate it. So I keep everything as simple as I can. So these dates that are on here might not work for you. You might not need to start your celery in February because you've got heaters under your seedlings, okay? So yours are going to pop up and grow and be ready to go in March, which is too early. So keep that in mind, okay? That's what these dates are based on here. So all those seeds there on the left are all started indoors, okay, in a sunny window. And then on the right-hand column would be when you're direct sowing. Direct sowing means you're actually putting the seed into the dirt, okay? So in April and May is when you can work the soil. When the snow is gone, the ice is gone, and you can get your shovel in there and you can start working the soil is when you can start putting in your lettuce and your spinach and your greens and your peas. In fact, right now you should be starting lettuce and peas and greens in your sunny window, okay, for transplant out. And then after frost, these are your tender crops. You want to make sure there's no more danger of frost before you put out your beans and your beets and your carrots, okay? And I recommend get yourself a little planner and keep good records. I sowed these seeds January 1st. They didn't pop up till January 20th, and whatever. And then I was eating them in March, whatever it is. So that you'll remember next year, I need to start those earlier. Or I need to start them later. Because you think you're going to remember this kind of stuff, and trust me, you don't. There's just way too much to remember. So I always write everything down on the calendar, hanging on the wall or whatever, so that you know next year. All right, so let me show you here how this works. I used to do this live up front, but nobody could see except the front row, so I took a video here. So whatever container you're going to use, make sure you have really good holes in the container, okay, for drainage. Get yourself a bucket of your potting mix and pre-wet it. Do not use it dry. Your seeds will go everywhere. Pre-wet it so that it squishes together kind of nicely, but it's not sopping wet. There shouldn't be water just dripping out of it, okay? So pre-wet it. In fact, use warm water. That'll help it germinate some too. And then just smooth it down inside the dish, the container that you're going to use. So the surface works better so that your seeds stay in place where you want them to be. Kind of pat it down gently. And then you can see I use my fancy equipment here. I've got my finger there, and I poke the little holes for the seedlings, or the seeds, not seedlings yet. And you can see those are seeds that I saved from last year, and those are just tomato seeds. So I put 1 or 2 in each hole, just depending how old the seed is, and if I'm sure they're going to germinate, I'll just use 1. But if you're not sure, put 2 or 3 in each hole. And then just gently just cover them up and pat your soil, pat it down in there so that your seed is down where you want it. Don't smash it in. You don't want it to be like concrete, but just gently tap it down in there and then just water it gently. You don't want to take your water and just hose it down because obviously your seeds would go everywhere and they would all be down in the corner of your pot down here in a big bunch. Okay, and then label them. Make sure you label or you'll have a surprise later. All right, so some problems that some people have with germination. If they just don't come up, what's going on? It might be too cold. Your room might be too cold. The soil might have been too cold, okay? So you could warm them up. You could, if you have a wood stove and you have a shelf above it, put it above there for a few days. They'll pop right up, usually. If you have, you could put it above your refrigerator. That's a good source of heat. It's about right to germinate seeds up there. Or if you have heating vents in your house, your living room, you can put them on that to get them going, but it'll dry it out very quickly, so make sure you keep an eye on that, and you do not want them to dry out. Keep the soil moist, okay, just so that when you touch it, it sticks to your finger. And make sure that you didn't plant your seeds too deep. I've done that before, and I'm like, why didn't they come up? And then I pull the soil back, and they're really struggling to come up, but I had them too deep. And like I said, with the old seed, that could be why they haven't come up yet. So this could be a possible solution right here. This would keep your seedlings warmer in your sunny window, especially at night. Just put them in. Those are lettuce tubs on the picture there, and they're just flipped upside down on top of each other. But you can use these. These little tofu things fit perfectly in here like that. But I would definitely vent it during the day, okay, toothpick or something in there to prop it open or whatever. Get some air in there. It'll mold. Okay, so once they pop up, sometimes you have problems. Sometimes they just quit growing, or they fall over and they die, or whatever. It could be that you don't have really good soil. Your potting mix wasn't really good. And so you can remedy that by fertilizing them with some seaweed fertilizer, fish fertilizer, and like I said, use a heat source, and do not overwater. Definitely don't want to overwater. So sometimes you might see some gnats or something flying around your plants or your soil. That would be because you didn't sterilize your pots at the end of the year. So when you're done with your pots, make sure you're cleaning them out with soap and water. Keep them clean so nothing is passing on to the next plant. Keep some airflow. Some people like to have a little fan going over their plants so that, you know, there's proper airflow there. And I'm going to skip down to the bottom. The damping off would be it just suddenly just falls over and dies. And I would say that would be bad soil from what I've learned anyway. And maybe too much water too. And legginess is what I want to show you next. Okay, this is a picture of legginess, okay? Has anybody had plants that look like that? Okay. I didn't get to them in time, but that's okay because it's learning for you, right? You get to see my mistakes. So that would be, they're too tall and they're too thin, they're too skinny, they're falling over, and they're just not healthy. So I will show you how to rectify that, but I want to show you something here. Some people ask me, why can't you just take a big pot like this and put a seed in it and grow it? You can do that, but that's what you'll get is a tomato that looks like that. Okay? And I'm going to show you why. Here's another thing you can do if you can't get to them right away, just tie them up to little bamboo skewers or something like that until you can transplant them. Okay, you're just trying to hold them up so they don't break. Okay, so transplanting. This is what we used to do at the greenhouse where I worked. We were always transplanting plants. They would come in these little tiny little 1-inch plug trays, and then we'd put them in the little 6-packs, and then we'd put them in the pots. Okay, and the reason that you do that is because you want to, where's my thing here? When you first have them in a little thing like this, they can't go very far. And then you dig, I'll show you on the video, but then you dig them out, and then when you put them in the next size up, the roots can't go very far, and so it's forcing the growth up the stem, which is making a thicker, hardier stem and a healthier plant, okay? Whereas if you start it in here, it's just going to be going all over the place, and, you know, the growth is into the roots, and the roots are going everywhere. All right, so when do you transplant? I want you to look at the picture there, and in the center of the picture, there's 2 little leaves. Do you see those? Those are called the true leaves or the second set of leaves. Once you see your little seedlings have that second set of true leaves on there, then you can transplant it. And you need to transplant it because you're starting so early. You're starting in January or February, okay? And the reason why you're doing this is because by the time your plant goes out into the garden, your tomatoes and peppers, eggplants or whatever, they need to be about this tall. Okay? And they will probably already have flowers on them. So by doing this method, you're going to be eating tomatoes in June, July, August, September, and maybe October if you provide enough covers. Okay? That's why I'm teaching you how to do this, because when you live in a cold climate, you cannot take a tomato seed and just stick it in the ground and expect to have a tomato. You may have a little green one by August, right? Right? I mean, I've been there, I know. I'm speaking from experience. So by doing this transplanting method, your plants are going to be bigger, they're going to be healthier, they're going to be ready to go in the ground, and you're going to be eating tomatoes and peppers and eggplant all summer long. Okay, so let me show you how it's going to look with the transplanting. These are the tomato seeds. You see the second set of leaves there in the center? Okay? So that one's ready to transplant. So I'm not careful with them. They're hardy. I just dig them out with a fork. And then they're going into the little pony pack there, a little 4-pack. You can collect these too, or you can get them at greenhouses or online. You see how I just stuck it down in the hole and patted it down in there? I buried it as deep as I could, about up to the neck. Now the next one here I want to show you is kind of tall and kind of leggy. But I want to show you what you can do with this one. Just because they're leggy, don't worry, it's fine, okay? You're literally going to take the plant and you're going to bend it and stick it down in the hole, okay? So I would not recommend doing that with pepper plants. They're too fragile. This is just tomatoes. I would bend it, okay? So I'm a visual person, so this is what it's going to look like, okay? This is your tall, leggy tomato plant, and the picture that I showed you guys earlier of the leggy plants, this is what I did. I dug them out like that, and I literally just took the whole entire plant, I folded it like this, and I put it down inside the pot. So you bury it about up to here, as deep as you can, all right? That's how you're getting your first little seedlings. That's your first transplant. You're starting them in here, or something like this, and then you're going to the little packs next. If you don't have those, use little cups, whatever you have, next size up, okay? Here's the next size up. You could do that if you want to. If you just have those kind of cups, or if you have these, you can use these. That would be the next size up, all right? Same method. Take it out, bury it as deep as you can up to the neck, all right? And then the next one. Now, if you have a greenhouse, you might not even go to this size. You might be able to just go ahead and put your plants out when they're in this pot. It just depends on what your situation is. But I'm just showing you the steps that you can take to get large, healthy plants. All right, so can you take a plant that's been growing in your warm, sunny window like this and just throw it outside in the garden? No, it'll be in shock, okay? You have to harden it off. That means get it ready to go outside. So there's different methods. The two main methods would be stick it out on your front porch just so it's got a little bit of sunshine during the day. Don't blast it with sun the first day. It'll die. It hates that, okay? And then bring it back in. Next day, a few more hours outside, maybe a little bit more sun on the leaves. Okay, bring it back in. Next day, a few more hours outside. Don't just throw them all out there. You're going to be sorry that you did. Or if you have a hoop house, greenhouse, you can harden them off in there. And that's what I like to do. The picture there on the right, I take them all up there around April probably and stick them there and cover them with these row covers, this frost blanket, probably 2 layers of it depending on the weather. And I just leave them there like that for about a week. And then the next week I'll pull the covers off during the day because remember, you don't want them in the full sun right away. It's just too much, you know. And then the next day, pull the covers off a little bit more. And then after a week, pull the covers completely off and let them sit there for a while they're getting acclimated to being in your greenhouse like that. Okay, so those are 2 different ways you can harden off plants. And then getting them into the ground here. So when you're planting or transplanting your tomatoes, you want to have a nice deep hole and you want to put some manure, not if it's decomposed manure, not fresh. Those are worm castings that you're looking at there. Or some type of fertilizer for your plants, something to get it going, give it a good start, okay? Also, I recommend with your tomatoes, I would put a radish seed in with each plant and just let them grow, let them go to seed, and the pests will eat the radishes and not your tomato plant, and that has worked great for me. And also garlic. Put a bulb of garlic in between each one of your plants also and just let it grow. Just keep cutting the tops off and cooking with it and just leave it in there forever. And that keeps pests away too. So a couple tips there for you. All right. Now, if you're not going into a hoop house and you're going into the garden outside, I recommend that you transplant either in the evening or on a rainy day. Do not do it on a nice, warm, sunny, hot day. Your plants will be in more shock that way, okay, when you do that. And somebody told me in one of my classes one time that something scientific happens inside the plant after 4:30 p.m. Something shuts down, and I don't know what I don't remember, some scientific thing, but I thought that was kind of cool. So keep in mind that you want to do all your transplanting into the garden later in the day. And the picture on the right, you'll see they are kind of in a little bit of shock there. But usually they'll bounce back and they'll be just fine. Just water them really, really well. And when you're transplanting, make sure you're putting the supports in the ground with the plant. So if you're going to be using stakes for your tomatoes, put the stake in the ground with the plant. Don't go out after 4 weeks and bang stakes in the ground because there goes your root growth. You'll destroy your whole entire plant, okay? So these are just some different examples of the bird netting I use inside the greenhouse for the peas. It just kind of grows up the side, the plastic there, up the bird netting. I've used cattle panels, I've used strings, you know, just whatever works for you. These are just ideas. Okay, and then another idea would be to do some intensive planting, which means if all you have is a little tiny space in your greenhouse or outside in your garden, just go ahead and take an entire pack of lettuce seeds or chard or whatever that is, I don't remember, and plant a ton of them in that one little space, okay? And you can see what I did there. And it's okay, let them come up like that because you're going to break them apart and spread them all over your garden later. But you're just getting them started there. Okay, so now after you put out your cabbage and your broccoli and you know where everything is and how you want it, now you can go back to that little space and take your garden trowel and dig those up and just take these little plants and put them all over the place in your garden because they like shade. Lettuce and spinach and stuff, they like the shade, the greens. So put them under your cabbage plants or put them under your broccoli plants. Just put them all over the place. Okay, that way you don't have to have more stuff growing in your warm, sunny window because by then, trust me, you're tired of having plants in there. At least I am. Okay, so let me show you what that looks like transplanting, like maybe moving things around in your garden. This is just a celery plant. You just kind of go around the plant, just kind of chop at it. You're going to have to destroy some of the roots to move it, but usually it's fine. I wouldn't do this with all plants, obviously. I wouldn't be moving around cabbage and broccoli, but lettuce and chard and celery transplants really well. And so what I do is I take my celery at the end of the season before it frosts and I transplant it into the greenhouse. And then in the spring, I take that exact same celery plant and I move it back out into the garden. So you can use the same celery plant for 2 or 3 years. It doesn't like it extremely cold, so make sure that you've got your covers on in there, which we'll go over that again. But yeah, that way you can keep using the same celery plant. And celery takes a long time to get going. That's why I start mine in January or February. All right, so people like to ask me about weeds. These are just some ideas. I've put down cardboard boxes. They work really, really well. You could also mulch on top of that. You could buy the garden fabric if you would like to. That can be an expensive option, though, if you have a huge garden. And also, if you are hand watering everything, that helps with weeds too, because you don't have water going everywhere watering the weeds. You're just watering the plants. But if you could do a drip system or something like that, that would be really nice too. All right, so let's discuss pollination a little bit. There aren't as many pollinating insects around, at least from what I've seen. So you need to think about how some of your plants are going to be pollinated. Now with tomatoes, I just walk through the greenhouse and shake the vines. If they're on a string, it's really easy. Or if your tomatoes are outside, the wind, and maybe pets brushing up against them will pollinate those. Or if you have a fan going in your greenhouse, that will pollinate them too. Eggplant is self-pollinating, so you can put a cover over that to keep it warm and just leave it there all year and just let it be. Cucumbers, if you want to do cucumbers, you need to make sure, and I know Johnny sells them, and I can show them to you if you're interested, but if you're going to do them in a greenhouse, which I recommend because of the cold climate, get the parthenocarpic. It's a weird word, but those are the kind of cucumbers that don't have to be pollinated. So if you're worried about the pollinating insects not getting into your greenhouse, get the ones that don't have to be pollinated. If you don't have that problem, then you don't need to worry about it. Okay, and then melon and summer and winter squash, you can hand pollinate. So the picture there is a picture of a zucchini, and it has a flower on the top of it, and the fruit is the female flower. Okay, so when you see that fruit, the flower on top of the fruit is the female flower, okay? When it opens up, it looks like a bowl shape, okay? And so the other flowers on the plant would be the male flowers, and they do not have a fruit attached to them. It's just a flower on a big, long stem. So you just clip off with your fingers the male flower, and you literally just pollinate the female flower, stick it in there, and leave it. That's it, okay? And then you've just pollinated that plant. You can watch how to do that on YouTube, too, if you want to. How to pollinate, or I think that's what it's called, how to pollinate squash. Okay, so how can you extend such a short season? Get some more days out of it. So this is one thing I did. I dug up my pepper plants from the greenhouse before it started freezing in there sometime in October and brought them in the house, and they ripened. They actually turned red and orange and yellow, which was kind of cool. But then they got aphids on them in December, and I threw them out. But it's an idea. So if you've got some that you're trying to ripen up, put them in a pot in your living room. Decorative plants, right? I think this is such a cool idea for people who have maybe an apartment only. All you have is a backyard, a porch or something like that. This is just a bag of potting mix that somebody cut the top out of, like a picture frame, and just planted all these lettuce seeds inside and then covered it with a tub. That's perfect. I mean, that's a greenhouse right there. I could not believe how much food came out of that. So that's a great idea for maybe older people or things that can't get out. Okay, another way to extend the season is to just make your own little greenhouse out of a water bottle. So get your little seedlings that you started, broccoli, that's cabbage. So if you started your cabbage in your window and you put it out, but you know there's still going to be a bunch of frost coming, just stick one of these over top of it for another month. Okay, and that'll protect it, and you can water straight down through that. And then just take it off when it gets big and the frost is gone. This is something I've just recently become acquainted with. These are really neat. They're kind of expensive, but you fill them up with water, and then you put them over top of where your plant is going to go about 30 days before your plant goes in. So it's actually creating this mini microclimate inside of that plastic there and heating up the soil and everything. And then you just open it up and put your plant down in there when you're ready and leave it in there until the plant starts growing up out of the top and you know that there's no more frost, then you can get rid of the wall of water. These are really nice. I've been enjoying using those. Another idea is you could build a grow box. That would extend your season. Just get some straw bales and go to Restore or something, or if you have old windows laying around, just be aware that whatever's growing under glass is going to get hot very quickly and possibly burn the leaves of the plant. So make sure that you're ventilating it during the day, prop it open, okay? This is my favorite way of extending a short season with row covers, okay? And what you do is you get a frost blanket. That's what they're called. They're called frost blankets. You can look online. They sell them all over the place. They're not expensive. They last for many, many years, too, if you're careful with them. So what I do, I go out around, well, it depends, who knows, with the weather. But I go out around maybe April, and I put down black plastic, which I get the black lumber wrap plastic from Home Depot or Lowe's. It's free. And you get that, you put that on your bed, and that starts warming the soil underneath. Maybe that's finally thawing out your last layer of ice, right? And so it's getting it ready. And then when your soil is ready, then you transplant your cabbage or broccoli out. And once you put those in the ground, then you put these little hoops in, and these are called PEX tubes. PEX tubing, it's electrical, I believe, or is it plumbing? No, it's electrical. Plumbing, thank you. I've been doing this too long. Plumbing. They come in big rolls, so you just literally stick these in the ground like you can see there on the picture, and then cover your tender crops there with your frost blanket, clip them with clothes hanger clips, and then you've got 30 days extra at the beginning of your season, so you do that in May, okay? So that will protect. Now, don't do that with tomatoes, okay? These would be like broccoli and cabbage and greens that you're trying to get going a little bit earlier. That will protect them enough. You're getting 30 days now extra at the beginning of the season. Now, at the end of the season, before your frost comes, I'm just going to say September, beginning of September, do it again, okay? Get your covers back out, get your hoops back out, put them back in the ground, and put your frost blanket back over top of everything again at the beginning of September to protect from that first killing frost. Because usually, if you can get your plants through that first killing frost, you've got another couple weeks at least, right? At least from my experience. So that gives you now 30 days at the end of the season. So now you've got an extra 30 days in May and an extra 30 days in September just by using these. And they're like $20. So that's what I've been doing. Here's another idea. If you have a handy 9-year-old that wants to build you something for Mother's Day, he can build you something like that. And that is just gray conduit stuck in the ground, okay? And the door on the front is a pallet, a wooden pallet cut in half. with just a plastic thrown over it with clips from Harbor Freight, okay? Not fancy, but I had the most cucumbers I've ever had come out of that greenhouse right there. All right, so let's go through some other things. This was at the beginning, so I'm going to spend time on this. If you're not growing herbs, grow herbs, okay? They are full of all sorts of medicinal properties. And I will tell you this, they take forever to start seedlings, so you might want to buy those as plants. All right, asparagus, you can have the same asparagus bed sometimes for 20 years or more. So if you're not growing that, make sure that you are. The first year it comes up, don't harvest any. That's hard to do, but it needs to reseed itself. Second year, you can harvest maybe 3 or 4 of them. That's about it. Okay, and the third year, you can harvest more. Let them grow up like that and get all bushy, and then they'll die, and then cut them off and just mulch the bed and just, they're heavy feeders too, so add your manures and things like that to it in the fall, and then just let it, decompose all winter long. And this is the very first plant that comes up in your garden in the spring. Does anybody notice that? This is the first thing that pops up. And I read something about that, and I believe that the reason is because God put so much nutrition. If you study it for yourself, but that there's so much nutrition in that asparagus because we haven't had any during the wintertime, so this is the first thing that comes up to get our bodies going again. Study it for yourself. It's interesting. Okay. I also recommend you grow cabbage. It does really well in a cold climate. Even if you don't like it, I'm sorry. Learn to like it. That's what I tell people. I don't like green beans. Well, I'm sorry. They grow well, so grow them anyway. So you could do 2 different types of cabbage. And also people say, can we do succession planting? Like, can we do this month and then this month? I would say no. This is like a once and done type short season climate. With cabbage, however, you can start them in your little seed, pots here. You can do a short season cabbage, like it could be ready in 30 days or 60 days, so then you're eating cabbage in the summer too. But definitely do a storage cabbage, and that's what it's called actually, is a storage cabbage, okay? It takes longer, and it won't be ready till after frost, which is fine, because you're going to store it all winter long. You pull the entire plant out of the ground, and you hang it by its roots in a garage, root cellar, basement, whatever, a place that you have that's not heated, and you will have cabbage all year, like till I'm still eating cabbage. So, yeah. September, October, November, December, January, February, March, probably till April at least, depending on how many cabbage you grow. One year I did 30, it was way too many. But I'm telling you, it does well and it keeps well. So definitely do that and figure out which varieties you like. But okay, so now with the carrots, I don't plant them out in the garden anymore. I plant them in the greenhouse. They just do better. I used to try to dig them up and keep them, and they never kept for me. I tried every method possible, and they always rotted every single year. So now I just leave them in the ground. So some people leave them outside and they remove the snow so they can dig them out. That's fine if you want to do that, but if you've got this much snow, I don't know how you're going to remove it. But anyway, I plant them in the greenhouse with tomatoes because they're companion plants. They grow well together. So I will do a row of carrots next month, okay? Then a row of tomatoes, carrots, whatever, like that. And then I just leave them in there all year. So whenever you need a carrot, you just go up to your greenhouse and dig them up. And they last just fine. If you're not doing garlic, do garlic. Garlic is very medicinal. You should be having garlic a lot. You should be eating garlic a lot. I know there's a garlic farm around here somewhere, but anyway. You put it in the ground in mid-October before it frosts, okay? And then you mulch it because you don't want it sprouting and coming up early. And then you water it like crazy. Garlic does the most growing in the fall when you first put it in the ground. So water it, and then how do you know when to pull it up? Well, the last 2 leaves on the bottom of the plant start to die. Okay, they turn yellow, die. Pull them up, and then put them in the sun or part sun and let them dry out. Green beans. This is how I get good green beans. And if you want a name of a good one that works well, it's Provider. That's the one that I've grown for the last 8-9 years. Provider. And I start them in flats. That's a picture of a flat, okay? You can buy these online or get them at greenhouses. They'll sell them to you. And I probably start them maybe in April, mid-April, because these are more of a tender crop, so you don't want these out until after frost, okay? But you want them at least 6 inches tall. How many of us have worked so hard to make all these nice straight rows for our green beans? We go out, we put the green beans in the ground, right? And you water them, and then what happens after about a month? You have a green bean over here, and you have a green bean over here, and you might have one over here, and you're like, where did they all go, right? Some of them don't germinate. It's so frustrating because then you have these wide open spaces where there's no plant. So by doing this method, you're giving them a head start, and you have a plant every 6 inches. You have a green bean plant, and you can see them, and you know where they are. And so if you think that you're going to need 50 plants, plant 75 seeds, okay? Always plant extra because you're going to be losing some. These are the extra ones there in the flat that I did not plant. And some, if one dies, I just take one of those and I just put it in there where the other one was. Okay, so onions. How many of you knew that if you're going to grow onions in a short season, you have to buy long day onions? It's funny, isn't it? I know. So how many of us have bought the onion sets that come in the little bags? They're about that big. How well do they do for you? No. I did research on that. Why aren't these things going? They're selling us 2-year-old onion seed. Okay? So don't waste your money on that anymore. If you want to grow onions, you have 2 options, okay? You either buy the onion plants from a nursery. North 40 carries them, but you got to get them quick because they sell out quick. Or grow your own from seed. So what you do is you can start them now. Okay? Put your seeds, intensive planting because you're going to be spreading them out later. Just put the whole pack in here. It doesn't matter. Okay? So you can do that and then transplant them out to your garden. Or you can do what I've been doing the last couple years is overwintering them. And so what I do is I take a spot in the garden. I'll show you on the transplanting video next. And I do intensive planting very close together. And I put all my onion seeds in there in August. Let them get about, I don't know, they usually get around 6 inches tall before frost. And then I dig them all up and I move them into the greenhouse. I will show you that in a second. And then I put a row cover over them, the frost blanket, and they sit there all winter long until spring comes. And then when danger of frost is gone, then I dig them up and I put them out into the garden. So the picture on the right-hand side, you can see they're spread out more. I spread them out. Okay, so that's how I have done the onion seeds like that. And then what you do is you give them, I try not to mix this up, there's blood meal and then there's bone meal. Okay, so the blood meal is the nitrogen and that gets the green stem going. That's what you would give them first is the nitrogen. Fill the bed with manure or nitrogen, okay? And then once your greens are going pretty well, then you can take yourself an old butter knife and bend it like this and make yourself this little scraper tool and go around and wring them in. It's called wringing them in. So you're scraping the dirt away from the bulb. So you just have the roots in the ground. And that way the onion bulb can swell. And then you give it the blood meal. Okay? The blood meal then, did I say blood meal already? Bone meal. Bone meal is the second one that you give it, and that will cause it to swell. So just sprinkle it around, and you'll get big onions, finally. So let me show you how I do the transplanting with the onions. So these are out in the garden in August, and I want to get them up before it starts frosting outside, and so I'm actually moving them to the greenhouse. I just kind of loosen up the soil and pull them out. You know, you don't have to be careful. Onions are pretty hardy when they're little like that. You can move them around several times if you wanted to.
Is your greenhouse heated during the winter?
My greenhouse is not heated. Nope. We will go over that on part 2, unheated and uninsulated. So I've got a big bunch of these onions here, and these are yellow Spanish onions. They've done really well for me. And I've already got a little trench dug there, as you can see, and I'm not real careful as far as like trying to spread them all out by inch or whatever. It really doesn't matter because you're going to be putting them out in May anyway. So, and then just cover up the roots with dirt, and I'm amazed at how well they do. They just hang on in there all winter long. They're green and they're beautiful, and they just sit there and they wait until you put them out into your garden. And I think there's a day coming real soon where we won't be able to go and buy these plants. I think very soon. So you need to be learning how to do all this stuff.
You water those at all?
I water them, yes. I water everything in the greenhouse until November, and I will go over that too. Potatoes, if you're not growing them, make sure that you are. Go get some organic potatoes from Azure or something like that and start sprouting them. Put them in a cold, sunny place. Let them start getting their eyes on them, okay? Go online and look at how to plant them. There's so many different ways. Some people just use straw. Some people put them in big, 55 or big, huge like trash cans. I don't know. You just have to decide what works best for you. But make sure you're growing potatoes because they store well too. You should be storing them all year long, okay? So the things that I'm teaching you about are all things that grow here, that I know that grow, and that store, okay, so that you can have food. Sweet potatoes, if you didn't know, you could grow sweet potatoes and yams. If you want to know how to start the slips, I can tell you that afterwards. There's a few plants out there for sale if you're interested. But you can eat the vines. Maybe you didn't know that. So if you don't want to plant these in your greenhouse, they like it warm, by the way, so don't just throw these out into the cold. You can eat the vines, and the vines go crazy. I'm telling you, you'll be cutting the vines off all the time, but you eat them just like spinach. So if you wanted to grow it as a pretty house plant, you can just have a vine that's edible. And you need to have really loamy, loose soil. So a lot of like perlite or coconut coir, things like that you can put in there. And they grow this way. The potatoes grow up and down like this. It's really bizarre. And everywhere that the vine goes, it'll send down another shoot to have another potato. So. All right, winter squash. I finally figured out how to grow good-sized squash. How many of us have been frustrated with squash about that big around August? Yeah. Oh, what a waste of time, right? Okay, so they like it warm too. So here's what you do. You find out where you want to put your squash. You put your black plastic down to warm the soil. I just leave it there. This is just always where they go, and so the plastic's always there. Cut a hole where you're going to want each squash. And in the fall, if you can, go ahead and put your amendments in there, like if you're putting manure, because they're heavy feeders, okay? Or I bury kitchen trash scraps in there. I just dig a big hole and I bury stuff in there so that it's getting ready for spring. Now, if you're just starting, that's fine. Put stuff in there that's already decomposed. Maybe you already have a compost pile. Or at the very least, put some type of fertilizer in there for them. Just a general fertilizer, garden fertilizer, with the plant. Okay, so people have said you can't transplant this, you can't transplant that. Well, I do it all the time, so I know it works if you're careful. Start your seeds in here for your squash. You're not going to be transplanting these anymore. You're just going right into the ground from here because they don't like their roots messed with. They're fragile, okay? So start it in a larger pot and have your hole ready, okay? And maybe your wall of water, that's what I use, the wall of water is over top so that's already warm and it's ready to go, okay? So you just gently cradle the plant in your hand and just tap it very gently to get it out of the pot. You know, you're not going to be like, like this and then messing with the plant. You're going to kill it, okay? So just very gently, and then you've already got your hole ready to go, so then you put it down into the hole and cover it up, and you've got your little wall of water, or you've got this, or whatever you're using for some protection because it likes it warm. Now, then you cover it, okay, with whatever protection you're using. Get your frost blanket back out again. You can see the picture there. Get your little hoops out, cover it up. Leave them covered until they flower. So these things might be covered up for 30 days or more. Keep an eye on them. And you can water through these, by the way. They're water permeable because it likes that warmth. Okay, so it's like a little mini greenhouse in there with the black plastic, and they'll start vining around. They'll get their flowers. Then take the cover off when they start flowering so that you can either pollinate them or the insects are pollinating them. And then at the end of the season, so we're talking mid-August, go around and take off all the little tiny little fruits, okay? Because they don't have enough time. They have like 2 weeks left to grow. So take them off, get rid of them so that all the energy from that squash plant is going into your bigger ones that you have. And you might only get one big spaghetti squash, but that's better than nothing, right? I know it's heartbreaking to go over and clip them off, but trust me, you're not going to get anything out of it anyway. So after you clip those off, then cover them again with your frost blanket, okay? And then you're going to get another 30 days out of that plant. And then you'll have big squash. That's the best way that I have found to do it. And then cure them. Make sure you're curing them in the sun for a week or two. And how do you know when to take them off the vine? They die. They start dying, and you can tell. They get hard. Can't stick your fingernail in the flesh anymore. They start getting hard. Again, you can look on YouTube for stuff like that. How to know when to harvest squash, stuff like that. Okay, so these are some more plants that I recommend growing. Blueberries, if you're not, get them going now. They take about 6 or 7 years before you really start getting any berries. So get them going or buy bigger bushes if you can. We already talked about carrots. Beets and turnips, they keep really well. Also, celery we talked about. Corn. If you're going to grow corn, get the shortest day corn that you can find. I think they have either 60 or 65-day corn now or something like that. And they don't get as tall as, like field corn. But boy, it's tasty. I'll tell you what, it is worth it if you can do corn. And then greens. Greens you can do 3 different crops in because they grow so quickly. So right now you would be starting like a spring, like lettuce mix or something like that. Spinach, kale, and chard, arugula, stuff like that grows in the spring. And if you look through your seed catalogs, it'll tell you. It'll tell you this is good for spring, this is good for summer, this is good for winter. Because just because you have really good lettuce plants growing in the spring doesn't mean you're still going to have that same lettuce plant in August. Because a lot of lettuce does not like the hot weather. I've found the red lettuces do better in the hot weather, but some of these you can just look at the description. It'll tell you this does better in hot weather, or this is for cold, or whatever. That way you've got greens all year, and I'll show you how to do that in the winter. All right, if you're not doing Jerusalem artichokes or sunchokes, you need to, because you can keep them in the ground forever. You can just dig them up whenever you want one. They're kind of like little not turnips, like potato, I don't know. They're weird looking, but they spread like crazy. And then they have a really pretty sunflower on the top looking thing. All right, and of course raspberries and strawberries. Make sure that you're growing things like that come back every single year. All right, we already talked about heirloom and non-heirloom, but if you're going to start collecting seed, this book on here, Seed to Seed, is the best one that I have found. It tells you how to save seed from any plant imaginable. The one there that's pictured is white spear onions. Those are winter onions, and I have a few seeds out there because they used to be out. They didn't have any, but they may in here now. I don't know. But I have onions now. Now, these are green salad bunching onions all year because I let them go to seed, and then the seeds go everywhere. And then you just dig those green onions up and put them wherever you want, and you're going to have onions all year. One method of seed saving is called when they're wet seeded, and that means like a pumpkin, you're pulling it out. Seeds are wet, you got to wash them off and let them dry. That's probably the method most people are familiar with, pumpkin seeds and stuff. Tomato seeds, you have to actually let them rot, and then you peel the mold off the top, and then you can save the seeds. Because it does some type of chemical reaction or something where it separates the gelatinous sac that's around the tomato seed. So that's how you save tomato seeds. Dry seeded just means you let the plant just go to flower, and then you can either let the flowers drop their seeds all over the place, and then you just have stuff coming up wherever, and that's totally fine. Or clip the seed heads off the top and put it in a paper bag and just let them dry in there and shake them once in a while, and then you'll have those seeds. But just make sure that you are labeling your seed. If you're like me, you think you'll remember and you won't. Okay, so if you don't have any space outside, here's a few ideas for you. I think the one on the top right is a shoe rack, which is kind of cool. But if you use something like that, they do tend to dry out faster, so keep that in mind. So just some ideas for you for makeshift garden spaces. All right, so now we will take some questions on part 1. And I'm going to give you, while we're doing questions, if you need to get up and go to the bathrooms back there, 5-minute break or so, and then come and talk to me, and then we'll start on part 2. So does anybody have questions on this part?
Potatoes, you're gonna talk more on potato problems in the second part?
I'm not going to talk anymore about potato problems. No.
I couldn't hear it.
No. Just winter gardening. Yes. Question?
So you had said when you cover your spaghetti squash, I don't have problems with it. What I have problems with is it's growing out, and then I know it can freeze. How do you? Because I use plastic. I don't use that cloth stuff. How do you protect all
then
the
they also
vines running from that? Still from that?
She's asking, how do you protect the vines from your squash that are going everywhere? So sometimes I actually pick the vines up and move them gently, because I've lost some squash that way too. Yeah, I just pick them up and I try to keep them closer to the plant. I start training them when they're little so that they're not going 50 feet everywhere. But yeah, good question. In the back?
Not necessarily a question, but baby diapers work really great on like that shoe rack for holding moisture.
That is a great idea. Did everybody hear that? So she said to take a baby diaper, and do you actually plant in it?
You put it under the soil, and then when you
Okay.
water, it retains the moisture and slowly releases it back up to the plant, so you aren't out there.
That's fantastic. I love that idea. Thank you so much. That keeps the moisture under the...
Is putting ice cubes in a Ziploc bag if you don't have time to be watering a plant at the end of your driveway or something. Put some ice cubes in a Ziploc bag with some holes in it.
That's a great idea too. Thank you so much. That's great. Okay, let's start here and we'll go around. Yes.
Do you, the geoengineering or the SRM sprays, do you have any tips on neutralizing the soil before you're planting?
I don't. I have not done research on that. Would that be part of like soil testing kits and things that you could do your own, maybe? That's what I would say. Yeah.
When
Yes.
you're talking about soaking the old seeds in water and Epsom salts, how long do you soak them?
I don't know if she told me that. I don't think she told me that bit of information. That is a good question. Does anybody know on soaking the old seed in the water and the Epsom salts? Somebody over here seemed like they had heard of that before. No? We're wondering how long to soak it. Well, how long would you normally soak a seed? I've heard some people soak their seeds. Is it like a week or just a day or two? Or I wouldn't want to soak it too long because it'll rot.
Yeah.
So maybe not even a day, maybe just a few hours.
Okay.
I would do an experiment and try. And can you email me and let me know if you figure it out? So, because people will ask me that probably next time. Yes.
I was going to ask about that too. It's 1/4 cup Epsom salt, a fourth of a cup.
Yes.
1/4 or 1
A gallon. Yeah, gallon. Yeah. Yes.
When you mentioned storing the cabbages upside down, where did you say you keep them?
In a cold storage, like if you have an unheated basement or an unheated bedroom, or if you have a root cellar, or...
Like would a garage, if it freezes at night, is that bad? Would that be bad?
Obviously, I mean, if it's in a root cellar or something, it's not going to freeze. So yeah, you don't want it to freeze. But if it does freeze, you can still use it. Just use it right away. Like you can dehydrate it or turn it into coleslaw real quick, get it in a jar. That way you're not losing it still. But I mean, you're going to lose some of the outer leaves no matter how you store it. But just pull them off and then you still got a good head of cabbage there. Anybody else have questions? Okay, we'll start up in another minute as soon as people start getting back in here.